When Scripture speaks in numbers, mathematical transmutation and the discovery engine. Parts 2, Father's Publishing Shield Protocol documentary series. February 2026. Imagine holding a book in your hands. You have read it 1,000 times. You have memorized whole chapters, debated its meaning across decades, translated it word by word from ancient languages into modern English. You believe you know it. Now imagine someone tells you that book has a second language, one written not in letters, but in mathematics. A language so deeply woven into the structure of the text that no human author could have placed it there deliberately. And that this hidden architecture has been waiting silently, patiently, for the tools to finally exist that could hear it speak. This is the story of what happens when 32,000 verses of Scripture are converted into pure mathematics, and what the mathematics said when it was converted back. For over 30 years, Dallas James has worked in relative isolation on one of the most ambitious translation projects in modern biblical scholarship, the Urim Thummim version, a Masoretic-based English translation that preserves the divine names as they were written. YHWH, Elohim, not Lord, not God. 32,356 verses across 52 books, each one tagged with shield protocol markers, binary flags identifying whether a verse carries the signal of identity, inheritance, priesthood, governance, or typology. For years, those markers were analyzed one draw at a time. The Life Force experiment would select 7 verses at random using quantum-grade entropy, and a shield protocol would measure whether the marker clustering exceeded what chance would predict. The results were remarkable, sigma values that medical research would call definitive. But every analysis looked at a handful of verses. A biopsy. The question nobody had asked was, what would happen if you converted the entire corpus, every verse, every marker, every word, into a single mathematical object? In February of 2026, that question was answered. The mathematical transmutation pipeline processes the full UTV corpus through 7 computational phases. It parses nearly 14 million characters. It tokenizes every verse into 948,000 linguistic units, preserving sacred nomenclature as indivisible objects. The name YHWH is not broken into letters. Elohim is not reduced to syllables. They pass through the mathematics hole. Then the transformation begins. Every verse is converted into a high-dimensional vector, a point in mathematical space with 2,000 coordinates. The technique measures not just what words appear in a verse, but how unusual those words are across the entire corpus. Common words carry little weight. Rare, theologically dense words carry enormous weight. The final phases fuse the linguistic data with the shield markers, DP level scores, and genre classifications into a single feature space. Over 2,000 dimensions per verse. And then the pipeline asks its question. Across all these dimensions, do these texts behave randomly, or do they exhibit structure that transcends what any human editorial process could produce? The answer came back as a number. The non-random index, 66.8%. That number means that across 6 independent analytical dimensions, semantic similarity, marker distribution, DP level convergence, tier distribution, genre distribution, and vocabulary overlap, the texts of the UTV corpus behave as a unified mathematical structure. Not loosely correlated, not vaguely similar, structurally convergent at levels that produce a z-score of negative 28.69 against randomized baselines. To put that in context, a z-score beyond 3 is considered statistically significant in most scientific fields. Beyond 5 is considered definitive. 28.69 is beyond the vocabulary of conventional statistics. The probability of the observed patterns arising by chance is, for practical purposes, 0. The mathematics had spoken, but it had spoken in numbers. The question became, could those numbers speak back in words? Every verse in the transmuted corpus still has an address. The mathematics never destroys the map. It transforms text into coordinates, but the coordinates remember where they came from, which means you can ask mathematical questions and receive textual answers. This is what discovery mode does. The centroid finder computes the mathematical center of gravity of any group of verses. Select every verse carrying the full dominion triad, identity, inheritance, and priesthood simultaneously, and it finds the invisible center of that cloud in 2,000-dimensional space. Then it asks, which actual verse sits closest? The answer is the purest mathematical expression of that theme in the entire Bible. Not the most famous verse, the one the mathematics identifies as the structural heart, but it also finds nearest outsiders, verses living in the same mathematical neighborhood that carry none of those markers. The Shield protocol never flagged them. Yet mathematically, they sit closer to the thematic center than many flag verses do. Hidden family members, invisible to every prior method of analysis. Hidden neighbors pushes further. Select all priesthood-marked verses and ask the system to find verses with 0 active markers that occupy the same semantic territory. Verses from books you would not expect, historical narratives, wisdom literature, minor prophets, that the mathematics insists belong to the priesthood family. These are cosine similarity scores in the high decimal range. Vector signatures nearly identical to the marked ones. The cluster scanner operates in 3 modes. Crossbook resonance finds verse pairs from different books, different authors, different centuries that occupy virtually identical mathematical positions. Outlier detection identifies verses that do not belong in their own book and tells you which book they do belong to, revealing structural bridges that stitch the canon together across time. In bridge verses finds texts at the exact midpoint between 2 dominion triad centroids, convergence zones that no human reader could identify without the mathematics. What has been built here is not a replacement for scholarship. It is not a replacement for prayer. It is not a machine that reads scripture for you. It is a lens. For 30 years, Dallas James has worked verse by verse through the Hebrew and Greek Bible, tagging, translating, cross-referencing, building a corpus of extraordinary depth. The Shield protocol turned that corpus into a measurement instrument. The life force experiment demonstrated, at medical research-grade significance, that prayer-guided selections consistently outperform algorithmic controls. The mathematical transmutation did something different. It took the entire edifice and proved the structure is not local. It is global. The patterns do not exist only when you look at 7 verses. They exist when you look at all 32,000. The Bible, as represented in the UTV corpus, behaves as a single mathematical organism. In discovery mode, gave that organism a voice. It can now say, look here. These 14 verses across 9 books were never connected by any commentary, any concordance, any systematic theology. But they share deep structural DNA that the mathematics can measure and the human eye cannot see. Read them together. See what emerges. That is the reversal. Text became math. Math found patterns invisible to text. And now math is becoming text again, pointing the scholar, the student, the seeker back into the words themselves, but with coordinates they never had before. Inquiry. You asked a question. You received a direction. The answer came not from human reasoning, but from a mechanism designed to bypass it. 32,356 verses, 2,000 mathematical dimensions, 7 computational phases, 3 discovery engines, 1 corpus, 1 voice. The numbers heard it. Now you can too.